Good deal. All right, so across what you guys put together in our last class session for the top 3 things that you guys do, we have the following list. And these are not in any particular order. They're not ranked by frequency or anything like that. Frequency being the technical term for the count of how many times people said this one. So video games. And video games was pretty broad. Everything from Rainbow Six Siege to Candy Crush, to PC gaming, to console gaming, to VR gaming, and we're going to separate games that you play that happen to be online on a computer, like Dungeons & Dragons Online through D&D Beyond, or Roll20, or Tabletop Simulator, something like that. You happen to use a computer. We'll call tabletop gaming and other traditional forms of gaming separately from video games. Second, content creator, streamer. Like and subscribe, ring that bell, right? Third, watching or streaming online long-form videos. So that's Twitch, YouTube, but also stuff like Hulu for Letterkenny, Netflix, all that stuff. What else? Hiking, far and away the most popular. Gym exercise, aerobic, high-intensity interval training, weights, wall climbing in a gym, shopping at TJ Maxx. I can relate. Social media, scrolling, including watching short video clips, car camping or developed front country camping, scouting, venture crew, so organized trips but in a vehicle-supported way. Let's see, relaxing, hammocking, lounging outside. I should probably combine that one with napping, right? Napping inside or outside. Not a bad gig if you can get it. Listening to music. So listening where that's sort of the point instead of just as background noise. Folks like it either way. Fishing in its many forms, right? Bass fishing, fly fishing, angling. We haven't had any open ocean sport fisher folks in class this year, but that's been a thing in the past. Closely related. Reading books, manga, like the 1,000th issue of One Punch and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, etc. Oho, You Approach Me, Zawarudo. Also webcomics. Tabletop gaming, D&D tactical miniatures such as Warhammer 40k if you hate your wallet, board games, Gloomhaven, Twilight Imperium, stuff like that. Backpacking, separate from hiking, right? So more of an overnight or longer distance or higher effort kind of thing. Bushcraft and survivalism, right? Can you go into the woods with nothing but a knife and a match and recreate experiences like the show Survivor Man with Les Stroud, or that horrible Bear Grylls guy, or like Naked and Afraid? You guys ever seen any of those? All right, that's bushcraft or survivalism. Art, sculpture, painting, 3D modeling, hanging out outdoors, just like going to the lake with friends, that kind of thing. Not necessarily going out there to swim a bunch of laps, but just like taking the vibe. Road trip. That is a quintessentially American form of forest and outdoor recreation. Road trip. We might not even be anywhere near the forest, but driving. Yeah? Think about how many songs are related to road tripping culture, car culture. Next, this is a very, very common one among the wider world population, which is walking. And then finally, napping, if we don't include that in hammocking. And interestingly, these things grow and change and evolve over time. Obviously, 100 years ago, road tripping, not really a thing. Except for a very few folks with a lot of disposable time and income, typically the younger folks among the nobility. But it'd be road tripping in a carriage or a chaise and four or on a horse instead of just rolling along in your Camaro. It may or may not be a Transformer. Okay? So there's a pretty wide variety here, and that's exactly what we're hoping to see. All right, so let's jump forward now into forms of forest and outdoor rec. So if you turn this in on Tuesday, you have credit for it in the grade book. You're good to go. You can pick these up after class if you would like, or I will securely shred them. Let's talk a little bit more now about the specifics of forest and outdoor rec. So again, we'll narrow in from sort of the broad concept of leisure and start to zoom in on the large scale stuff that's a lot more sort of closely recognizable for professional management in forestry. Okay, so with this we have we need to start thinking much more specifically about how the activities we're going to talk about, the dynamics of the humans doing those activities, who want to do those activities, the humans managing people who want to do those activities, the park rangers. We need to think about the overface and, in some cases, the dependence on the resources that folks want to use to do those activities, right? So we can't have chilling by the lake with friends without a lake. As dumb as that sounds, let me know, show of hands, if this hits differently between these two examples. So, chilling at the local pool, maybe the Student Rec Center's pool down on the lower level, the Shea Natatorium. Natatorium is a fancy Latin derived word for swimming pool or swimming room, versus chilling at the lake with friends. Do you guys feel there's any sort of meaningful difference there, or is it just like, I am with other humans near water? All right, so there's a difference. What do you think that difference is? Like, what's the sense of what makes that meaningfully different? Just anybody. The breeze. Yeah, okay. So the warm sunshine versus the cold white fluorescent light bulbs in an indoor pool, or above an indoor pool. Okay. All right. So there's this sense of we have to have certain kinds of resources, physical resources like a lake, for certain kinds of experiences. And among all of the physical resources that we could possibly use for that activity, it has to be of a certain quality, of a certain shape and or size. In the case of a lake, maybe a certain depth minimum. Otherwise, it's a very shallow, hot pond. It's deoxygenated, and maybe there's not any interesting fish to look at, right? So it's not just having resources, it's having enough of the right quality of resource in an accessible place where it's legal to go and safe to go and do it. So you can get a sense of how, okay, we're gonna have to start checking a lot of boxes to be able to actually provide a lot of this stuff for the 350 million-ish visits or visit days every year just in the United States National Park System. And then a couple of 100 million more visits every year, year after year, across the National Forest System. And lots and lots of visits, not nearly as many, but to the United States Wilderness Preservation System, right? Like, we're gonna have to manage a whole lot of resources to make these human dimensions kind of work, all right? So we need to zoom in quite a bit from general leisure. So we define leisure as kind of free time, discretionary time, unobligated time. Nobody else is telling you what to do. So that could be just napping at home, or it could be a pretty involved backpacking trip, right? All of that qualifies as leisure. Where we start discriminating away from things just like napping towards eventually forest recreation is we're going to define recreation as the subset of leisure activities that are structured, they're recognizable in their pattern, and they're active. So the lean back forms of leisure, chilling on the couch, watching Letterkenny, or binging whatever your favorite shows are. Binging the Marvel Cinematic Universe for 25 movies up through Infinity War? Like, crazy. That's a lot of sitting, right? We wouldn't call that active. We'd call that lean back or passive leisure. Okay? So recreation is at least physically active, probably mentally active as well, socially active, potentially, maybe not, but at least physically active, right? Getting out there, moving. Now we can have indoor recreation, things like rec sports clubs here across campus. There's a rec sports club for everything, right? Flag football, ping pong, you know. Ping pong you can do anywhere in the world and it's the same thing. As long as, you know, the paddles are all regulation size and the table and the net are all regulation size and shape. For anybody watching the Olympics, right, it's all very standardized and so forth. So that qualifies as recreation. Now, recreation can include sport, but forest recreation, not really a sport, so we'll talk about the difference there in just a bit. Outdoor recreation is obviously just the stuff that is not tied to the indoor space of facilities. Now, outdoor recreation absolutely needs facilities. In this class, we define facilities as any part of a designed or built environment. That can have nothing to do, that can be miles from the nearest building. Facilities include things like trails, trailheads, fencing to keep people away from dangerous areas, parking lots at the trailhead, the backcountry toilet or privy or outhouse, all the same thing in slightly different terms. That people need to sort of use the restroom in a way without destroying the ecosystem or leaving socially offensive traces of their passage behind for other visitors to find. Okay? So, outdoor recreation is outdoor and it is based on, to some degree of intensity, a physical resource, like the lake to chill at, or like you can go indoor climbing, sport climbing at any climbing gym or the world record rock wall that we have, climbing wall we have over at the Student Rec Center. One of my grad students helped design that 10 years ago. Pretty cool stuff. Check that out. But it's not rock climbing unless you're outdoor on some rock. Yeah? Cool. All right, so pretty clear and easy distinctions here. Forest recreation is now, we're subsetting down into very specific settings, right? Obviously, forest environment. So that could be Shawnee National Forest, which is karst and sandstone bluff country. So it's not like mountains, but we have a lot of forests across a lot of mountains here in the United States as well. And then there are a really pretty short list of activities that, like park rangers, foresters, forest protection officers, etc. There's a pretty short list of activities that we're willing to work with, or that we're able to work with on the basis of environmental sustainability and visitor safety and protection of some of those physical resources that people may be coming to that facility and that resource to enjoy. So hiking through that forest, that setting, that ecosystem type, on a trail, using the specific facility type, they may or may not be there to hike around, backpack around, be near, experience, encounter the particular kinds of, you know, bald eagles, let's say, on site at Crab Orchard Wildlife Refuge or something like that. But whether or not the visitors are there to encounter those bald eagles, they're absolutely affecting the bald eagles by their presence, right? So if you have too many people by the nests at certain times of year, that can cause that nesting effort, the natality rate or the successful birth rate of those birds to fall below population replacement. So sometimes we gotta kind of fine tune which activities and then timing, the location, the intensity, the particular quirks of any of those particular activities to keep that forest recreation setting, ecosystem, the species healthy and vibrant. Okay? Cool. All right, so another way to look at this, instead of kind of like the nested doll, the Matryoshka doll diagram here, the Venn diagram, we have and this is all for you guys. This is a dendrogram. This is a branching tree diagram, dendrogram. All right, so at the same level of leisure as recreation, we have things like sports, which are going to be, well, we'll get into it here in a sec. All right? We'll see this org chart a couple of times. You don't have to copy this all down right here. We'll kind of take you through each one of these, mostly just to differentiate kind of the yes/no of stuff that you need to worry about on any particular deployment as like a backcountry ranger, for example. So if somebody wants to do a particular sporting event on your national forest and they apply to do that sporting event, like rally car racing, which is it's on road, but there are forest gravel roads, unpaved roads, high speed car racing through typically national forests, rally racing. And the races are typically like 80 to 120 miles per hour, not super fast as far as cars go. But on forest roads, if you've ever been on a forest road, 80 to 120 miles an hour requires very specific set of skills, just like Liam Neeson, very specific hardware in that vehicle, and in most cases, a co-driver to say to the driver as they're rocketing along at 120 miles an hour, hey, there's a very sharp left-hand turn coming up in 100 meters. It's a tightening radius turn, so you need to slow down hard and not load the outside tire too hard, right? There's this constant stream of dialogue between the co-driver and the driver so they don't yeet themselves off the outside of the curve and understeer into a tree at 120 miles an hour. All right, so let's go into a whole bunch of yes-nos. Forest recreation is not just being outside. It's not sports and athletics. It's not tourism. Even though tourism tends to be really adjacent to a lot of forms of forest and outdoor recreation, okay? But we're gonna drive a bit of a distinction between those two. So this one we're gonna land a little bit hard on, and we'll not talk too much about boredom because, right, we're defining recreation as an active thing. So you are leaning forward, you're up out of the chair, you're outside doing this stuff, okay? So, forest and outdoor recreation is not tourism specifically. Tourism would include things like, for the purposes of this class at least, we're going to define tourism more along the lines of, okay, so we've saved up some money, let's say $8,000. And with that $8,000, we can go on a 7-day cruise and see a bunch of dinner shows, eat ourselves silly, get like uncontrollable explosive diarrhea from food poisoning and unsanitary conditions in the cooped up environment of the cruise ship. What's not to like? For 7 days of glorious face stuffing and different ports of call and stuff like that. Or we can take that $8,000 and go backpacking for 6 months straight. Forest and outdoor recreation in the case of backpacking, not really active, not really outdoors in terms of being on that cruise ship. Has anybody ever been on like an all-inclusive cruise? What was that like, y'all? Like what kind of stuff do people do on cruises? Other than stuff themselves silly and maybe get uncontrollable diarrhea. I'm mostly joking about the diarrhea, sort of. What do people do on cruises?
I don't know. They have like events and stuff you can go to mostly.
Events like dinner shows.
Yeah, like dancing. They have like kids areas where kids can just get away from their parents.
Where the parents can get away from the kids, right? That sounds like pretty good child care to me. Full disclosure, my wife and I don't have kids, so throughout the semester I'm going to make cynical jokes and comments about kids. But if kids are your life way, rock and roll, go hard. Alright. What kind of other stuff do people do on cruises? What time do you wake up in the morning?
Well, I mean, there's no windows in most of the cabins, so you kind of just wake up whenever.
You wake up whenever.
This shit.
Yeah, I sleep until 11 a.m. You do you, boo, right? Okay, cool. So, things that are tourism are where, for the purposes of this class, right, you're paying the tour operator to move you around, to organize things for you to do, and to work pretty hard at filing all of the rough edges off that stuff that you're doing. So, for example, there are 7 highest peaks in the world, one for each continent, right? And the highest peak on the African continent is what? Anybody know? Kilimanjaro. Very good. And Kilimanjaro is maybe the gentlest of the high peaks to summit. Pretty different than like Everest of Asia, right? Everest is what, 5 miles into the sky up from mean sea level? Pretty tall. There are taller mountains, but most of them are hidden under the ocean, for example. So, anyway, whatever. Kilimanjaro is a fairly easy, it's a walk-up mountain. You don't have to have climbing gear or alpine stuff to make it up cliffs of ice. Don't have to have oxygen bottles like on Everest and so forth. Denali, the highest peak in North America, around 21,000 feet, is so tall that in order to rescue people off of it from time to time who are trying to climb that peak, the National Park Service has to evacuate people one by one with a helicopter because the air is so thin, those blades can't provide enough downward thrust to lift 2 people at a time out safely, right? Most of these mountains are pretty burly. Kilimanjaro, not so much. You can pay people to carry your stuff up Kilimanjaro and Everest. On Everest, it's going to cost you $75 grand in cash just for the permit, plus all the gear, all the food, all that stuff. You got to pay your Sherpa, your porters, and so forth. On Kilimanjaro, they'll hike up a pavilion tent for you, set it up. You can have snacks and tea as you walk up the highest mountain on the African continent, enjoy the views, and then walk right on down while somebody else carries your shit. Like, that's more along the lines of tourism than forest and outdoor recreation. Okay? Now, the line's a little bit more blurry for climbing, hiking, walking Kilimanjaro versus being on a cruise ship. But both of those are examples of tourism where somebody else is doing the logistics, doing all the heavy lifting, making it easy and safe, and hopefully, some core memories, some lifetime level fun. Okay? Now, this image is all about sometimes there are some downsides to poorly managed or overly aggressive tourism. We'll call that over-tourism in this class as a technical term for it. So lots of places in southern Spain or on the Mediterranean coast of France deal with many, many thousands of visitors, and living and making a living in a tourism-focused economy can be pretty nice. Everybody shows up, they spend a lot of money into your economy, and then they go away, right? That's kind of nice. Like, it'd be cool if people came into this classroom, made it rain a little bit, and then were like, bye, and left, and you never saw them again. But if they're coming there to party in places like Mallorca or Ibiza or other places like that, so Mediterranean islands where the party is 24/7, 365, right? It can be kind of gross when people show up.
Also having a problem with that too, with the tourists with tourists causing havoc a bunch of different places.
You got it. Yeah. Okay. So what this means for stuff like Shawnee National Forest is we have miles and miles of world-class quality horse trails that people come from literally all over the country to enjoy and experience and be impressed with. And you can bring your own horses and ride. A lot of people do that. And a lot of people will pay a local horse owner, a trail ride operator, a concessioner, right from our first day of class and those definitions, somebody who's operating a business in the protected area that you're managing. If you bring your own horse, for the purposes of this class, we're going to call that forest recreation. You're doing all the work. If you pay somebody for a room and a horse and the horse feed and the tack, so the saddle and the reins and bit and bridle and all that stuff, saddle blankets, and for the veterinary services to keep those horses healthy and safe, and so forth. We're going to call that trail ride a tourism operation, not a forest and outdoor recreation. Okay? Because interacting with a tour operator as the park ranger or the recreation technician or recreation specialist on the forest is pretty different than operating with individual family groups, rider groups that come out on their own dime, on their own recognizance, doing it all themselves. Okay? Cool. So, not tourism, not sport. We'll get to the sport here in a sec. This is forest recreation. It's just amusement without personal value. We'll spend a fairly substantial chunk of the semester talking about what are the benefits of forest and outdoor recreation. Like, what are we trying to deliver in a way for our visitors? When you go fishing, when you go hanging out at the lake with friends, when you go backpacking, it's not just that you do the thing and then you go away and do the next thing. It's that you do it and you reap a huge variety of very intense benefits. That's, for a lot of people, the reason why they do this stuff, right? Backpacking is hard, sweaty work, but it comes with a lot of benefits, right? You can poop with a view when you're backpacking, right? Like a 5-star poop is, you're up on the mountain. You can see over 100 miles, like out over the curvature of the planet, up on a mountain while pooping. And you're making eye contact with the wildlife pooping nearby, and you don't stop. Like, no shy performance there, right? That's a 5-star poop, okay? Some would consider that a benefit for forest and outdoor recreation. Maybe that's not your style. Anyway, moving on. It's not just escapism. It's not just tuning out, unplugging, and just kind of pretending for a while that the world doesn't exist. There might be some value to that, maybe some therapeutic value, but this is not just that. We're not just closing ourselves off from the sensorium around us. We're actually getting out into it quite a bit. And it's not low-grade just entertainment. Some people, we talked about serious versus casual leisure. Some people go pretty hard and they build a lifestyle, a self-image around the kinds of forest and outdoor recreation that they're doing. So we don't want to ever look down or cast as cheaply spent the effort and time that people are putting into forest and outdoor rec. Okay? Forest and outdoor rec is also not just party time. Okay? So this was a trend for a little while. Around the pandemic, people were starting a lot of wildfires, trying to do things that really had nothing to do with the forest. They just happened to be shooting tannerite or firing off Roman candles into dry grasses or forest habitats, and trying to capture some of that stuff. Yeah. This is not a real Smokey the Bear tweet. This is simulated, right? For the memes, okay? But the low-grade stuff we might call that passive, that lean-back leisure, the entertainment, the scrolling Reddit, for example. We saw that picture from Reddit a second ago. Scrolling Reddit, and every once in a while you see a funny meme, and you don't actually laugh, like you don't engage your core muscles and, enjoy all the neurological benefits of laughing. You just sort of breathe out through your nose, and then you keep scrolling, or you get like that quiet, sensible chuckle and keep scrolling, right? We'd call that entertainment. Very, very passive. What is the social media feed sort of shoveling into my brain through my eyeballs, right? Low-grade, passive entertainment. Pastimes, we're going to classify those as things like hobbies. Okay, so I love to build Gundam models, which are these super ornate, intricate plastic model kits from Japan, from an anime show, or a whole bunch of anime shows from the last 40 or so years. No, 50 years, oh my god, I'm old. Anyway, so yeah, that's lots of fun, but it has nothing to do with backpacking and so forth. We're not going to concern ourselves with things like Funko Pop or like PVC anime figurines. Don't make it weird, right? We're focusing on the outdoor rec. Okay, moving on. Just napping. We had hammocking, which spell correct on my computer didn't recognize hammocking as a verb. They try to correct it to ham-mocking, and I find that sort of cosmically funny. All right. This past winter, my wife and I and my in-laws went to Japan, and we toured around to a bunch of onsen, or natural hot spring, volcanically heated spas. Pretty cool stuff. But we wouldn't consider this outdoor recreation. What of our other things that are not recreation would we consider something like this, where somebody's providing you the onsen and the delicious sashimi lunch afterwards, and the heated bathrobes?
Would it be different if you provide yourself with this sashimi?
In this case, in this example, somebody else is providing all of it.
I know, but
So, what would we call that? Is that sport, tourism, pastime, entertainment?
you call this tourism.
Yeah, totally, 100%, right? You got it. Good. Travel by itself is generally more tourism. Now, travel can bring you to outdoor rec activities and opportunities, but travel by itself doesn't make it forest and outdoor recreation. It just means you're somewhere else than normal. Okay? So, again, these cruise ships are floating small cities with up to 5,000 or 6,000 people and hundreds of crew. This is the craziest drone video I've ever seen. Like, can you imagine the precision to fly near somebody's face with a drone? My God. Anyway. This is a simulated or virtual environment. You can tell by the way it is, all the pixels, right? This is a poke at myself because I used to work developing video games. But we do, interestingly, see some of the same, at least neurological and social benefits of forest and outdoor recreation activities now for the first time with brain imaging studies in certain specific kinds of video games. So, for example, about 15 years ago, there was a really cool medicine, burn and trauma recovery medicine study about burn victims who, third-degree burns over large portions of their body are going to have dozens of surgeries to graft skin and help those ruined nerves heal and so forth. As it turns out, having a virtual snowball fight in VR in a hospital bed has a more analgesic or pain-relieving effect than synthetic opioids. Okay? That's wild. So you could dose up on Toradol and get ileus, where your intestines kind of shut down and you get super constipated. Or you could have a video gaming session, and if you trick your brain into thinking, my skin feels cold because I'm in a snowy environment, at least that's what my eyes are telling my brain, it'll actually work on the ruined nerve signals coming in off of the burns across your body. Fascinating stuff. But obviously video games, not the same thing as forest and outdoor recreation. In certain video games, and visual fidelity doesn't have a strong effect on this, in certain video games, you can derive some of the sensation and benefits of being out in green spaces. Not the exercise benefits, right? Nobody's getting svelte playing Minecraft. But you can get a sense of immersion and place in a world where forest and outdoor recreation gets you there with a hike or a backpacking trip, or going overland in Minecraft, or in Skyrim, or some other kind of environment with a decently functional ecological simulation. Okay? So, this is a VR game meant to simulate bird flight, soaring. I can't do VR. I get like the vomit comet sensation. Man, it's hard. The headsets are getting much better, but yeah. Okay. So all this to say, most gaming is not recreation. It's not structured and active. Okay? Tourism, again, so pictures of Universal Studios and Disney and so forth. Not forced and outdoor recreation, obviously. Totally tourism. Alright, so this is Disney's Jungle Cruise, from which we recently got a The Rock movie that didn't do particularly well, but it was fine. Right? Walt Disney has set up the ability for everybody to just have somebody else take them on a simulated jungle cruise. Specifically, also, ecotourism is not forced and outdoor recreation because everybody is enjoying the services of a whole support network of people and facilities to do most of the work for them. And ecotourism is awesome for a sense of connection to wildlife and a widened out understanding of, yes, we live in a world that we can affect positively or negatively very powerfully. But we're not really managing this as park rangers, okay? Recently, we've had to add helitourism to this list. So, at the Grand Canyon, anybody been to the Grand Canyon before? No, all right. Come on summer camp with me. We might be going to the Grand Canyon this summer, or next summer, 2025. Places like the Grand Canyon have a lot of helicopter tourism to fly people with disposable money from Las Vegas through the canyon. You get awesome, cell phone videos and stuff like that. It's a couple hours long, couple $100, then you're back in Las Vegas, and that's a nice day. But the helicopter's doing all the work for you. And park rangers, the National Park Service, in cooperation with the Federal Aviation Administration, have had to very tightly regulate helitourism because of the noise pollution of one or two people in a helicopter that can pollute the audio environment of literally hundreds, plural, of square miles of territory underneath, especially if there's not a lot of vegetative cover to absorb a lot of that sound pollution. So the Grand Canyon, backpackers down in the canyon and whitewater rafters down in the canyon on the Colorado River were experiencing noise pollution from a helicopter flyby up to less than 1 minute intervals. I mean, can you imagine backpacking along for a week in the Grand Canyon and every 45 or 50 seconds, whoop, 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 right, another helicopter. It's like, I'm in a wilderness down here, but I'm definitely not feeling real wild about all this noise, okay? So, for the outdoor recreationists, the forest recreationists backpacking down in the canyon, the Park Service had to work with, or in some cases kind of against, the helitourism operators and say, hey, we're going to define a very narrow and specific flight path for you that we've figured out minimizes your audio pollution for thousands of other people so that this one or two person group can have a nice flight. Make sense? Question, comment?
When it comes to type of thing, would that be legislation they have to put in place to be like, hey, you can't fly here? Because I guess it'd be like us, we're like, no, you can't fly over our school. Or is it because it's their property, they can tell people what to do? How does that work?
Great question.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so in some cases, certain wilderness areas have been set up. Have you seen the movie The Village by M. Night Shyamalan?
Yes.
Okay. So the central conceit of that movie is exactly the question you're asking about. Certain wilderness areas have been protected by Congress, by name specifically, saying that air traffic can't go over them, has to go around, so that everybody in that wilderness area doesn't have to have their experience degraded by people just trying to commute, from one side of the country to the other. So that's at the law level. There's also much more commonly at the regulatory level. So laws are what are passed by Congress. Regulations are what are set up by the agency having to enforce that law or respect that law to actually accomplish the spirit of and the letter of what the law requires that agency to do. So The regulation might be, all right, we're going to set up this no-fly zone in this section of the Grand Canyon and not that section of the Grand Canyon. And that's the FAA and the Park Service working together. But it doesn't have to involve Congress, because Congress takes years to do anything, and when they do it, it's all wrong. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, I'm a public employee, so I can't say political things. All right. So, most tourism, not wreck. This video is broken. This is a boat tour through a sea cave system. It's really, really beautiful, but yeah. This is definitely not forest and outdoor recreation. Yo, dog, we heard you like whitewater, so we put a river in your river so you can whitewater raft. Like, somebody had to make a decision to improve this river valley with this built facility. So this is tourism, it's not forest and outdoor recreation. If folks were whitewater rafting down at the bottom, forest and outdoor recreation.
Also with that other video, if instead of being taken on a tour, if they took their boat, the boat that they own through that, would that be tourism or would that be recreation?
That could be recreation, yeah. So if they're doing all of the logistics and the route planning and like the sounding to make sure that the water's deep enough and they're not gonna drag their fiberglass hull over sea cave rocks, yeah, that's more the thing. Okay. So, and again, we're not taking a dump on tourism operators, right? This is how most people experience the world around them. They need some of these guardrails in order to be safe and effective and not have to train up to be able to do their own whitewater rafting trip. Okay? There's nothing wrong with tourism. There's nothing wrong with ecotourism. It just is a different thing than what we are primarily focused on. Okay? So challenge courses, high ropes courses, montane traverses like alpine traverses like this. This is adventure recreation or adventure tourism. Fun times. Okay. So, we'll now take a look at pastimes. So, pastimes would be more like, and this can be outside, but it's more like probably on your own property. Probably a community associated with it, but if somebody's doing ATV assist bungee swings, at their family summer cabin or something like that, next to Shawnee National Forest, okay, that's fine, right? Like, it's your land, you do your thing, okay? So we're not really managing this, except to the extent that this causes somehow any impacts to, like, the national forest next door, for example, okay? Cool. Now, let's get into sports real quick, and we'll probably end class somewhere around here. So, sports are indoor or outdoors. They are active, right? So it's at least adjacent to recreation. But forest and outdoor recreation doesn't have strictures like leagues and rules that rigidly define how to do that activity. And sports are mostly, almost all, so mostly, independent of the resource. So you can go play soccer anywhere in the world with a grass or turf pitch field of the right size, shape, and markings, right? Doesn't matter what hemisphere you're on, what continent you're on, it's a sport. And the sport's rules and leagues and strictures kind of abstract away all of the resource, all the environment stuff. Now, there is real truth to the idea that it is easier to hit a home run in some American Major League Baseball stadiums than in others because of things like differences in air density and wind and drag and stuff like that, and the size of the fields themselves. But that's kind of incidental. It's still absolutely the same game under the same rules and so on and so forth. The rules standardize away a lot of the variety, or any of the variety, in what we consider outdoor recreation versus these sports, okay? So stuff like golf, it's outside, but it's not really forest recreation because you can golf anywhere that somebody has kind of terraformed the golf course in, all right? The resource is incidental instead of being critical to the heart and soul of the activity, right? So golf, indoor, outdoor, putt-putt, etc. Now, this video is broken. So this is a quick video of rally car racing. There's a car that comes careening around this corner and towards the camera and is like airborne almost the entire way. It's amazing. You can get crazy 50, 60, 70 foot jumps in these little Subaru WRXs modified with all the seats and stuff taken out. We would not consider a climbing wall forest and outdoor recreation, right? The National Forest System isn't on the hook to run a chain of sport climbing gyms, right? We're there to manage forests. So this we're not concerned with. We are hugely interested in understanding what somebody's preconceptions are if all the climbing they've done is at a climbing gym in a city, and then they come to Shawnee National Forest to do maybe rock climbing for the first time with some friends who are a little bit more experienced. We really want to know what's going on in gym climbing, because whatever their preconceived notions are, they may not have anything to do with the reality of being on actual rock in actual weather conditions near ground hornets and black bears and climbing above horses. Horses panic when rock climbers are nearby on the wall and the horse can't figure out what's going on, and do object attribution and figure out that that's a climber, it's a safe person, it's not a mountain lion getting to pounce on me, right? All right, so exercise, stuff like that, so forth. Firing this minigun is not forest and outdoor recreation because this gun range might even be on a national forest or adjacent to it. But we have gun ranges everywhere, and you don't need a national forest to do it. So, not resource dependent. Okay, cool. All right, speed round. 30 seconds. Subtypes of things that are forest recreation. We got wildland recreation. So this is gonna be backcountry stuff. This is gonna be your backpacking. This is gonna be your wilderness trek. This is gonna be your adventure education course, outward bound for 3 weeks at a time. At the other end of the spectrum, we can absolutely have forest and outdoor recreation in a totally urban environment, okay? There the resource is different and maybe capped under armor of concrete or asphalt, but it's still absolutely the real thing, okay? And the National Park Service has run real hard in this direction in the last 15, 20 years to try and get more people outdoors and connected with our great country's resources.
How does that differ from a sport?
Say again?
How does that differ from a sport?
There's no score. There's no judge or referee. There's no rules on this. They're just enjoying the resource. Does that make sense?
Okay.
All right, cool. So you don't have to do this any one particular way, according to the rules of the half pipe or full pipe skating league or anything. It's just like, yeah, I'm just gonna go shred the pipe, man. Question?
I was gonna say, like, what if they had a rock wall outside? Would that count as forest recreation?
Not so much, because we can install that same rock wall, climbing wall, usually with synthetic, like urethane handholds and stuff, like So-Il climbing holds, stuff like that. You can set that up anywhere in the world, kind of however.
Like, isn't it the same with this one?
Say again?
Like, isn't it the same with this though? Because this can be set up like anywhere.
This is a close, but not the same thing, and we're getting over time here, so let's end on this. But do you see how this skate pool, as it's called, is integrated into its environment, its landscape? It is dependent on the terrain being approximately this shape before we start putting in the features, okay? So this one's super adjacent. Urban rec is a thing. All right. We're almost there, but we gotta end up. We're over time. So I'll see you guys and gals, non-binary pals on Tuesday. We'll wrap this up and get on with our next thing. See you then.